In episode 3, Hassan is able to get away from the guys, but he heads to the attic and overhears a conversation between Claire and Raul. Raul asks, who were those guys? And Claire only wants to focus on if he's okay. And he says, yeah, I'm fine. Dad saved me. He was great. And she says, no, he's not great. He's dangerous. Raul says, nah, that's not true. But she says, no, it is. You're old enough to know who your dad is. He's dangerous. I don't want you seeing him. And Raul kind of had half the story. When they were driving over, he asked Hassan, are you really a thief? And Hassan said, well, you're old enough to know. 25 years ago, Pellegrini framed my dad, and now he's coming after you. So all of a sudden, his mom telling him that his dad is this horrible guy, it's kind of coming out of left field. But she gives him a huge hug and says, this is the last time he puts you in danger. I'm not going to let you see him again. And a week later, she's been true to her word. She's not answering Hassan, which is pissing him off. He meets with Ben for coffee, and he starts ranting and raving about how Claire has no right to keep him in the dark and not answer his texts or anything. And Ben reminds him, her son was kidnapped. This is kind of normal behavior. But Hassan feels like ratting him out to Pellegrini is going too far. Ben wants to get off topic, so he says, okay, well, what's the new plan? And Hassan says, well, if Pellegrini took it out on my son, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to take it out on his daughter. They start putting a plan together to manipulate Juliet. It starts out with Ben booking a reservation for 2 near a window at a restaurant. He then called Juliet and pretended to be a rich Canadian donor that wanted to meet with her for dinner at that restaurant. Of course, the rich Canadian donor was never going to show up. After that, it's kind of all on Hassan and Juliet to buy in. She needs to believe that he would do anything for her. After forming the beginning stage of the plan with Ben, he calls up Youssef, which completely takes him off guard, but lets him know that on Monday he wants to meet with him at a coffee place at 10 a.m. And he tells Youssef, do not bring the police, I will know. The next night, the first phase of their plan goes into effect. Hassan happens to stroll by that restaurant where Juliet ends up noticing him, knocking on the window and inviting him in because she's being stood up. Hassan plays it off like he's being trapped the whole time knowing that he's not. In fact, he actually plays it off like she had planned to be there and run into him. He starts questioning which members of the waitstaff are her security. He tells her that everything has gone too far, but she says, I don't know what you mean. I mean, I know everything hasn't been great with our families over the years, but we're not our fathers. Their relationship has poisoned our relationship. The reality is, there's no catch, Hassan. I'm here alone. Feel free to leave if you want to, but the food's really good. And when the waiter comes back, Hassan decides to stay. As Hassan and Juliet catch up over salmon, her father is meeting with a young financial analyst, we'll call him, named Philip. He lets Pellegrini know that calculations are pointing to them getting about $10 million in donations. 15% is going to go to the foundation. 85% is going to go to an offshore bank account in Hubert Pellegrini's name. After explaining the specifics, Philip asks him, I do have one question. Is Juliet participating in this fraud? And while Hubert hates using that word, he shakes his head. No, she's not. But back at the restaurant, Juliet and Hassan continue to catch up over the good old days and about how different their lives become from what they expected it to be. They actually decide to spice it up in a big way. They dine and dash. Although it's not really a dine and dash because Ben has already paid for the check. This is all part of the plan. They then steal a scooter, which was also part of the plan. But it's genius because it makes everything look so spontaneous. And as Hassan and Juliet flee, Hassan starts taking her through a trip down memory lane, if you will, hitting all of their former favorite spots. When Hassan finally drops her off, they both say how they had such a good time. But the next day is phase 2. Hassan going to visit Juliet as she tours an art gallery. As Juliet is talking to the museum curator, she sees in the balcony Hassan waiting for her. So she excuses herself to go talk to Hassan and says, look, last night we had fun. And Hassan cuts her off and says, well, today could be fun too. And she says, I adored last night, but we're not 20 now. She then excuses herself and heads back to the office where she runs into her dad and Philip. And her dad introduces her to Philip as the guy who's building the system to assist in donations. She then gets informed that a package has arrived for her in her office. But right before she opens it, she starts getting a flurry of notifications on her phone, on her email. And when she opens it up, she finds news articles and even a video of the museum curator that she was talking to being interviewed about a stolen painting. Now, this was all also part of Hassan's plan. He manipulated the footage. The footage was actually from when Notre Dame got caught on fire, but he changed the headline from Notre Dame to this painting. So at this point, Juliet has a pretty good idea of what this package is, but she opens it up to confirm that it is the, quote, stolen painting that isn't actually stolen. It's a complete fake. Ben took care of everything. Hassan couldn't stop there, though. He actually paid off some former prison buddies to come over to the place, pretend to be cops, and interview Juliet about the stolen art. This completely sold it. It also ensured Hassan that Juliet would come calling again. And of course she does. She meets up with him and says, "Are you crazy? You can't just steal a painting and send it to me?" And he's kind of chuckling a little bit about it, but she's freaking out because of the, quote, police that stopped by her place. She asks him, "What are you doing? The dinner, the ride on the scooter, now the painting. You made your choice. You chose Claire." And Hassan says, "Well, yes, Claire is the mother of my child, but that's all she is to me." She tells him to shut up and starts walking away. And he goes, No. Deep down, you have feelings for me. I mean, look, there are no police. You didn't rat me out this time. Just the two of us. We both want this. Maybe it's not too late." So Juliet turns to him and says, "Well, prove it." Juliet has this hobby of spying on Claire via Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And recently, Claire posted a photo of her with her new boyfriend and a bracelet that Claire's wearing that he bought her. So Juliet wants that bracelet. She wants Hassan to steal it for her to prove his loyalty. There is a slight issue, though. When Hassan goes to Ben about the bracelet, Ben has to tell him, "I kind of sold it to him. And it's not like there's another one out there. It's the only one. So unfortunately, if you do want the bracelet, you're going to have to steal it from Claire." This was not a part of the plan. And it forces Hassan to break into Claire's apartment and actually steal the bracelet right off her wrist, while Claire and her boyfriend are sleeping. Super awkward. But mission accomplished. He meets up with Juliet the next day and hands her the bracelet. He tells Juliet that he wants to start with a clean slate. That includes returning the stolen art that, once again, isn't actually stolen. He tells Juliet that they never actually got to start a relationship that they wanted to, and that is true. When they were kids, Juliet ran into Hassan down by a waterway and invited him there the next day. But when she went to actually go meet with him, Hubert got wind of it and shut it down completely. So a relationship between the two when they were kids really wasn't allowed to get off the ground floor. But when Hassan brings it up, Juliet kind of gets annoyed and says, "What, you want me to pick between you and my dad?" And Hassan tells her, 25 years ago, your dad framed my dad for stealing that necklace. If you don't believe me, ask your mother. She knows. Your mom will tell you the truth about your dad, what he did. Once you've heard the whole story, you'll do what's right. He then gives her an envelope with Yusef's contact information, telling her that it's a cop that they can trust. He caps it off with a cherry on top, telling her that they missed their chance when they were young, but they can do what they want now. And she is completely infatuated with him. And this is exactly what Hassan needed. He needed her to be infatuated with him if she was going to turn on her dad. She hands over the necklace and gives it to Hassan, who does end up sending it back to Claire. But right before he does take off, he tells her, "You'll know exactly where to find me," which is that waterway that they ran into each other years ago when they were kids. And then Juliet heads on over to her mom's place to get the full rundown of exactly what happened between Hubert Pellegrini and Bob Carr. And Anne Pellegrini admits to everything. How Hubert needed a fall guy, and that was Bob Carr. And the reason she didn't tip off the police at the time was Hubert Pellegrini was Juliet's dad, and she looked at her dad like a hero. Juliet urges her mom to go tell the truth, talk to the police. And then she hands over the envelope that has Yusef's contact information in it. And part of that contact information is where to meet Yusef. This is the whole reason why Hassan called him and said, "I want to meet for coffee." It wasn't for Yusef to meet Hassan, it was for Yusef to meet Anne Pellegrini and hear her side of things. Sure enough, Anne Pellegrini shows up and spills everything. And shortly after Hubert signs the paperwork with Philip, Yusef and the police captain bust on through and arrest Hubert for fraud and obstruction of justice. And it's worth mentioning that when Hubert Pellegrini gets arrested, Philip looks as shocked as Hubert does. This arrest hits the news and Ben's thrilled. He thinks mission is accomplished. But then he gets a phone call from Hassan telling him, "Yeah, I'm going to be a little late because I got to go meet with Juliet." And that wasn't a part of the plan. Ben urges him not to go meet with Juliet, saying, "Hassan, it's done." But Hassan just says, "I promise I won't be long," and then hangs up. And he goes down and meets Juliet, just like they had planned. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.